Welcome to the Past Lives Cafe. I am your host, Keone, an intuitive energy worker and acclaimed past life regressionist. Come with me as we journey through the spiral of time to forgotten places. Today, I am so happy to welcome Jennifer Boulanger. I was so impressed with her when I met her a few weeks ago as I was looking for some reconnective healing energy work to be done. And the more I've gotten to know Jen, the more impressed I am with her. And during our discussions, during post follow-up reconnection healing, which we'll talk about briefly, I find out that she had had some QHHT work done, and she shared her amazing experience with me, which is why she is joining me here today. Jen Boulanger is a compassionate reconnective healing practitioner and Reiki master with expertise in energy medicine since 2019. Driven by a heartfelt desire to support others on their healing journeys, Jen offers a diverse range of services, including reconnective healing sessions, intuitive tarot and oracle readings, spiritual guidance, meditations, and sound healing. She is also honored to provide the personal reconnection, a transformative, once in a lifetime experience designed to realign you with your true essence. Discover more about her offerings at www.soulenergysolutions.com. And that sums it up.
Thank you so much. You're so sweet.
Jen, tell me all about your spiritual journey. I know we briefly talked about it, and I'm popping this question on you to begin this discussion, but I am interested in hearing your details, especially since you threw out the carrot that there's some synchronicities in there.
Yes, I bought my first tarot deck when I was a teenager, but I'm fairly new to spirituality. My journey started in 2018. I was raised Roman Catholic. I really didn't dive into spirituality until 2019, really. In 2018, I had some trauma. I had a very abusive marriage that I was released from. And I had been experiencing lots of mental health issues. And these mental health issues were plaguing me my entire life. I had very dark thoughts for most of my life. Every day, I just didn't want to be here. I just didn't want to be here. And there was one day in August of 2018 where I said, I don't want to feel that way anymore. And I will do whatever I can to not feel this way anymore. And it was right after my husband left. I found an aligned therapist, and I didn't know it at the time, but she was spiritual. And she started planting these little seeds where in sessions, I'd come back after a session and she'd say, wow, you're really connecting with your higher self. What's a higher self? I didn't even know. So I'd have to look up these things. Okay, I like the concept of a higher self. I'm down with that. And then she suggested that I get a Reiki session, and I had no idea what energy healing was at the time. And it was interesting. I had booked that appointment. And then it was Labor Day weekend in 2018, and a friend of mine and I were looking for something to do. And so we went to a little town nearby called Ambler. It's a very cute little fun town. I drove and we parked in front of this psychic's office. And the office was closed. It was evening, it was a Sunday. We were just going to find a place to eat and hang out for a little while. We didn't think anything of it. I just parked there and went home. The next day, my friend gets a friend request on Facebook from the psychic that I parked in front of.
Wow.
It was just so bizarre. Neither of us knew her. So I said to her, we need to book an appointment. That's just too weird. About 2 weeks later, we booked an appointment at the psychic's office, and the psychic told me first, she was really right on about what had just happened to me in my traumatic marriage. And she told me Do you know your hands can heal? Do you know you're a healer? And I said, what? So it was like that. She's like,
Oh,
do you do Reiki? And I said, no, but I have a Reiki appointment in a couple weeks. So it just all kind of tied in together. These were these little seeds that were planted by my therapist and by this psychic, where I was just kind of like, okay, this is in the back of my mind. What's this all about? And so then in early 2019, my mother passed. And so I couldn't be in the same room with her as she was dying. The energy was just so heavy, and I didn't know what to do with it. And thankfully, I had siblings who could hold that space for my mother when I couldn't. So after she passed, I just felt like I wish I had known Reiki at the time because I feel like I could have helped her transition. That gave me the motivation to take a Reiki class. I started in Reiki and I was like, wow, this is really neat. I can really feel this energy. And so that started me on a journey. I became a Reiki master fairly quickly. It was all in the same year. And then I was drawn to reconnective healing just by a YouTube video of some guy waving his hands over people and they were shaking on his table. What's that? I want to do that.
which part? The waving or the shaking? I chose the shaking, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I wanted all of it. I wanted to experience it. So I experienced it and I had experiences during sessions, and they were just distance sessions. It wasn't even in person, and it was very intense. So that started me on the reconnective healing journey. And then we started getting into 2020 with COVID and everything. So everything just started expanding from there. And I just wanted to try everything, but just feeling a calling towards reconnective healing. During 2020, all of the trainings were shut down and delayed because we couldn't be together in person. So I was in this space between Reiki and reconnective healing where I wasn't really sure of what I was doing. I was just very intuitive about how I was healing clients. So I just went with my gut. When I finally had the in-person training, I realized I was doing it all along. So what I love about reconnective healing, it's like the freestyle of energy healing. There's no rules really. It's just very intuitive. Except for the personal reconnection, which is very specific, but the reconnective healing sessions are very intuitive. That's how it got started. But QHHT was on the way. That was January of 2021 that I decided to do that session. And that was after reading a number of Dolores Cannon books. On the journey up to that point, I had been starting to read different books on spirituality. I think I started Conversations with God was one of them. And Dolores Cannon books were really opening me up. And Brian Weiss, I
Yeah,
think, was
he
the
was
other
the other
one.
big regressionist. Yeah.
Yeah, so those books. And so it really just drew me to seeing what that was all about. And so I actually looked for a practitioner who had worked with Dolores Cannon directly. She would ended up being a couple towns over from me, not very far. I booked that session. And just the idea of having a conversation with my higher self just fascinated me.
So
So
that was what drew you more than just knowing what you had done in a past life, or were you looking to get into why you had always been plagued with darker thoughts?
I actually wasn't because
Oh,
I
wow.
feel like I had resolved it at that point. I worked so hard in therapy on just finding happiness, choosing, really not finding it, but choosing it. And it started with gratitude. Just gratitude changed everything for me. For 3 years, I named four things that I was grateful for every morning when I woke up, and I posted it publicly. And it changed my whole Facebook algorithm, first of all. Like I posted it on Facebook. And now I only get positive things in my Facebook feed. It's amazing. Gratitude just changed everything, really. It became the foundation for just peace and happiness and just choosing that. Prior to that appointment, I had done some YouTube regressions where I had experiences, whether it was like meeting a spirit guide or taking me to a past life. And I did have a past life experience with just a YouTube regression, but I thought guided would be much more powerful. And then the added piece of talking to my higher self. So I had some health issues I wanted to ask about. I went into it with no expectations at all.
And you chose somebody who had been directly trained by Dolores, probably in person at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
I've met two people who have been trained by her directly, and then I was trained by her daughter.
Okay.
I know they hold that process super close to
Mm-hmm.
how she intended it to be. And it can
Mm-hmm.
be somewhat limiting if you're someone who wants to rely on distance regression, that type of thing. So it was perfect that you found someone close by.
Yeah, yeah. I felt very blessed.
Were you there for a
It
long
all.
time?
I was there for 5 hours.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it was like 2 hours of just talking about my whole
talking.
life,
Hmm.
and then an hour. Yeah, it was like 2.5 hours, I think, of talking first, and then an hour regression and an hour conversation with my higher self.
I cannot wait for you to share what exactly you saw because I think there's this idea, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, that people automatically regress to what we consider a past or an ancient or a former time. But that isn't necessarily where we go. And I don't know, you're the perfect example because I don't know that where you went was past. I don't know where it was. Time frame.
And I don't either, because we
Okay.
never asked that question, what time period it was, but it definitely was outside of space-time. And again, I had no expectations. And reading Dolores Cannon's books, I think, helped prepare me for not having expectations because some of the past lives that she talks about are all over the place. So they're not just typical human lives. So I was open to anything. And where I went, I didn't even know where I was. It definitely didn't feel like a place on Earth. I came down off of the cloud and I was floating over this darker planet with a soil that looked like gravel. It was reddish and gray and black, like gravel. And I saw this white dome that was very close to the ground. And I felt like I was supposed to go into wherever that was. So she asked me how I got to the ground, and I said, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like a pod, but it was triangular shaped. It looked like the bottom of a sleigh with rounded blades.
Mm.
It kind of bounced as it landed. I got out, and I'm supposed to go in that building. I think it's a laboratory. It was funny because I didn't feel hot or cold. I didn't feel any sensation. I couldn't smell anything. And she said to look down at your feet. This is so weird. It was so hard to describe because I felt like I was a tripod.
I didn't
Um,
know that you felt like that. Wow.
So this is how I described it to her. I have a tripod body, but it's not that I have three legs.
Thanks.
I said I have multiple legs. Now, if I think about it, it would be like a rolling desk chair. Like it was a pole, and then all of these legs came out, but they moved kind of like a crab would move. It was like shuffling back and forth on all these little legs, but they were metal. And that's when I realized that my body was metal and that I had these two metal arms. And I said, I think I'm a robot. I clearly was aware that I had consciousness. And so she asked me about what I was doing and how I got into this building. There was a hatch, And the building was mostly underground, but the dome,
Hmm.
this white dome, was like its roof. So I went in and there were all these fluorescent lights, and I was like, oh, I need to charge myself. I need to charge my batteries. And there were these charging stations. She's like, how do you charge? And I said, well, I just back into it. It's in my back. And so I saw myself backing into this charging station in this laboratory. And I felt the energy come through the center of my being and expand out. And I was vibrating. I was tingling and vibrating, and it was crazy. I felt everything during the hypnosis session.
How did you know you needed to charge? Did you feel drained, or it was just awareness that you
It
needed
was
to?
awareness. It was awareness.
That's
And
neat.
it's funny because when she was describing what I should be doing, she's like, describe what you see as if it were in a dream. When the monkey mind goes, well, what if I'm making this up?
This
What if
up.
I don't see anything? I am not a good storyteller, let me tell you. It is not in my nature to be creative, writing wise, or storytelling wise. At least not to my knowledge. I never felt like I was any good at it. So I just relaxed into it. And every time she asked me a question, one of the things I did was repeat it back to myself and then relax and just let the image come because it didn't come right away all the time. But I can still remember everything that I saw. It didn't fade at all. So it felt like a memory. So she asked me what I was doing in this laboratory, and I felt like I was doing some sort of research. And there was all of these little squares of soil on tables, and that's what I was setting up. But then I realized that I wasn't the researcher. I was just the being that was setting up these soil samples for the researchers, for the laboratory, the scientists that were studying them. But I knew what they were studying. They were studying how this soil could support different life forms and soil samples from this same planet that I was on. So that's what I was doing there. Then it was time to go. And so I got myself out of the hatch and I had to propel myself out of there. It was interesting. I felt compelled. It was like I had no choice. I had to leave there. My job there was done. I had to leave there. I had to get back into the little space pod, and I plugged into that as well. And then that took me back to home base, which was this other planet, which was not dark. There was a sun, there was actual people. Whereas where I was, there was no one else there. It was just me. There were no scientists there at the time. There was no people on the planet. There were no trees. It was all barren and dark. There was no light really, other than the bright fluorescent lights inside the building.
You were in this artificially lit dome, but outside
Yes.
of that, there was no lighting.
Right. No, I didn't see anything. I didn't even see a moon or anything.
And you didn't sense any heat or cold, but maybe you couldn't because you were metal.
Right.
And you
Exactly.
couldn't smell because you
Yep.
didn't have a human
Right.
nose. Gotcha.
Yeah. So I knew I didn't have all of the same senses, but I was sentient. I could think, I was aware, I was an observer, and I was aware that I was programmed and that I couldn't override those programs. I was programmed to go back to this home base, and that's where I was in this shack. It looked like a barn, like an old barn shack. And there were about 30 other robots that looked just like me. And we were all waiting to be programmed. And there were these two men there that She asked me to describe them, and I said they were wearing medieval comfort wear. It was like Renaissance, like Robin Hood. Like they weren't wearing any pants. Like they just kind of had these robes they
Lederhosen.
tied. It was more like tights with a robe tied. It was weird, but they were goofy. Like one was kind of bigger and round and jolly, and the other one looked like Geppetto. It looked like Geppetto's workshop.
Oh my goodness.
There were all of these hanging lifeless robots waiting. I was one of them. I was just so bored. Even in the laboratory, I said that I was bored. I felt really bored. And then these guys reprogrammed me, which was in the crown of my being, like at the top of my head, which was this triangular shaped. I had two big eyes on the side, but it was round in the middle, but triangular. So it's just hard to describe because I haven't seen anything like it. So then I was on the next mission, which was to pick up some droppers. It was this time I was testing something else, like something liquid, or I was getting samples of something liquid. And so I had to go on to the next stage. And I was just so bored and not liking this life. It was so routine. It was just repetitive. I had no control over it. I was just compelled to do this next thing. I was a worker, drone type robot. She asked me a little bit about what the planet was, and I said it was a portal of some sort and that it was not of this system, was what I kept repeating. That
Ah.
was the phrase, not of this system. And then the word Helios came to me. So, whatever that means, I felt like it was the Helios galaxy. If there's a galaxy named Helios, I have no idea, but that's what it felt like. Then she said, well, let's go somewhere else important. And I was sitting on this beach. It was very dark, but on this beach, there were these sand creatures that weren't hermit crabs. They were like bigger than hermit crabs, but not crabs, not lobsters. But they were these silly little creatures that kept crawling out of the sand and rolling all over each other. And they were funny and silly. I came here, I thought initially to watch those creatures. She's like, but why are you there? Am I supposed to collect these creatures? And I'm like, no. And then I realized that I came there to die. And so she was like, how did you get there? And I said, I figured out how to reprogram myself. And she said, so I figured out how to override the system. And so I brought myself there, and she said, have you been there before? And I said, yes. And that brought me to another past life. And in that life, I was this little boy, and I felt like I was a toddler. And I was sitting on the beach watching these creatures just laughing and laughing. And I was there with this woman who I felt to be my mother. And she was bringing me there for the first time. And I was watching these creatures. It was interesting because it got about as dark as twilight, and the sky was purple and the water was dark navy blue with shades of dark teal and somewhat lighter shades of teal on the outskirts, on the shoreline. But it was mostly this dark navy teal water. There were two moons. So then I went back into the robot life, and then my batteries ran out, and I went into this golden light, and I just felt like I needed to rest there. I felt very warm and tingly and peaceful and calm, but I felt it in my entire body. And it was interesting because during the session, I was sweating profusely. I was really sweating. And then we went into the conversation with my higher self, which was very interesting. And she asked why I was shown that life.
Right.
And the first thing that I said was patience, because I tend to be a very impatient person. I want it done yesterday, and then I want to move on to the next thing. And I have very little patience for menial tasks, doing the dishes, vacuuming, cleaning, and tidying, and things like that. It's plagued me my entire life. I'm a fairly messy person, although I try not to be. My desk is like the messiest area, but in my healing area, obviously, I keep that very sacred and clean. It was funny doing these routine tasks is, yes, boring, but serves a very important purpose. And so it was to teach me that these tasks are also sacred and also important, and that you can honor them as well and integrate them into the day-to-day routine so that it's not so cumbersome. So that was the main message, but there was some other messages too that were surprising, such as I had to release emotional attachments and not be so attached to things emotionally and to situations and to people. That causes blocks in my life. So that came up. And also that I can reprogram myself in this life, that a
That's
lot of what I experience, these limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves, we can reprogram those things. We can release these things, and that I'm already doing that. Just like I reprogrammed my depression and my anxiety, you can reboot, you can reprogram, and you can release, and all of that. So that was fascinating as well. I had some health issues. So she asked where they stemmed from. And there were these other lives. Like, for example, I have a thyroid condition, and that stems from this life as an Egyptian teacher where I was speaking these truths and my throat was slit as I was teaching people mysteries, sacred information that they needed to know. And I was being literally ran after, and I was screaming and trying to get as much out as I could before they just went and slit my throat. And that was crazy. And I realized it was ancestral, and that was in my DNA, and that my mother was quiet and never really spoke up for herself. And that was part of that life that we shared ancestrally. It was fascinating. So we went in with light and cleaned different parts of my body, and there were habits I wanted to release as well,
mhm.
and different things that came up where I was holding things in my body that I didn't realize that I was holding things there, and just allowing this light and this energy to come in and clear it. So then it went into my purpose. I had an idea of what my purpose was because
Mhm.
doing this reconnective healing felt very purposeful to me. But my purpose is to raise the vibration and to hold the vibration, and that I was resisting that because I felt it to be challenging. And so this conversation was about there being more than one way to hold the vibration, that there's the difficult path and there's the gentle path, and I can choose the gentle path if I want to. And so it was all fascinating. In the past life discussion, I was very matter of fact, speaking in this same tone, but there was definitely pauses and heavy breathing and all of that.
Sure.
But in my higher self conversation, it was emotional. I was crying a lot of the time. It sounds crazy. I actually played it back before this interview so I could remember some of what I went through. It was very poignant. And at the very end, she was like, "Oh, we forgot to ask one question. We forgot to ask how the boy and the robot were connected." And I paused for a minute and I said, "The boy built the robot." So it was like the boy's DNA and consciousness that were in the robot. Because I felt in the beginning that I had some DNA that gave me consciousness built into my system, but it was the boy's DNA. It was his consciousness. It was fascinating. And it's funny because I'm not a big sci-fi person. I've watched some sci-fi movies in the past, like Star Wars and all of that, but I wouldn't say that I'm a sci-fi fanatic. That was interesting because it felt like a movie.
It sounds like a movie. And the first thing I was thinking, Jen, is that when you were talking about the darkness of that planet where you had to go work, I almost felt like maybe you were deployed because whatever was there couldn't hurt you
Mm-hmm.
because nothing else was growing. There
Mm-hmm.
was no sun. Everything was artificial where you could see within that dome laboratory, and that you were being used as a safe option as opposed to sending a human there. Almost
Mm-hmm.
sacrificed was the
Mm.
feeling. It makes sense. That's what we do if we don't want to send a human or an animal in for testing. We send something that can't get hurt into a noxious environment.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like, yes, I was testing atmosphere, I was testing
Yeah.
water, I was testing soil. I didn't have any emotions about it other than I was bored. That was the primary emotion, that I was bored and I had this feeling that I was trapped.
Yeah.
I was trapped in my own body. Like my consciousness was trapped in this robot body and I couldn't get out. It was all just observation, though. I knew the guys that were programming me were having fun. I observed that they were having fun. But was I laughing inside? No. But was I angry inside? No. I didn't have feelings like we have
Like
feelings.
humans have feelings.
Yeah.
Were
But I,
either of those men the boy grown up or you grown up?
no, I didn't feel that at all. No.
Okay,
Maybe
further
they were
along.
other people in my life, and I'd have to really meditate on that. But they probably are people from my life that I would recognize had I sat with that. Yeah, I'll have to sit with that, but nothing
Right, like,
stands out to me.
yeah, how is it that these two males are programming you so that you're an incredible doer and
They received orders. So they
ah,
had orders with instructions that they were following. So they were like middlemen too. But those were the only two humans I interacted with, at least in the regression. I felt like I came in and exited before scientists got there. I was not present when scientists were doing their work or whatever. So I left that session, first of all, vibrating more than I've ever have in my, like feeling more energy than I ever have in my entire life. I didn't feel anything like it. I almost couldn't drive. And thank God I only had 3 turns to make in the drive because I mean, she asked me, "Are you okay to drive?" I think so. I only have to make 3 turns. But every step I took on the earth vibrated up my entire body.
that's
So
amazing.
each step was just like zoom, zoom, zoom. I didn't know how to even deal with this. So I sat and didn't do much the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And the next morning, I sat down in meditation and I immediately went into another life. And in this life, I was this muscular, buff male, probably in his 30s, shirtless, wearing jeans, sitting under a tree. And in front of me was this path. And so I started walking this path, and it was kind of through an open area, and it led to a beach. And so I walked up to the ocean, and it was very bright, very sunny, and I was very tan.
The beach guy, right?
And out of the water comes this goddess, like this beautiful goddess, and she hands me a sword and she puts a key around my neck. I don't know what that was. It wasn't a long meditation. So that's all I saw in that life, but it felt like another memory. And it felt like I had some kind of big purpose to fulfill, some big mission that I had to fulfill.
There's so much around that as far as visualization and symbolism about keys and swords and directing energy and opening certain things. Did you feel like maybe that had something to do with the keeping the vibration up of the energy around you?
It felt like I have a mission,
Yep.
a really important mission, and that there's beings supporting me in that mission. And it's connected to lifetimes, 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 and that I will get the tools that I need at the time that I need them.
Oh, I love that. I
That just came
love
out of
that.
me, by the way.
I love that. And I had the reconnection with you, and you did reconnective healing with me distance. And my sister also saw you. She got to you before I did. And it was my idea. But anyway, just being in your presence, and I have to digress. Your house is spotless. So I'm not sure where this messiness occurs. I even used the bathroom, not to investigate, but I used the
Yes.
bathroom and everything was just spotless.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of keeping cleanliness in a sacred routine that might keep me more motivated myself. But just the whole healing presence of your environment is palpable. And one of the
Thank you.
things, yeah, it really is. And one of the things that my sister said was that when you go there, you're going to smell the most delicious cookies you've ever smelled in your life. And I sure did. I sure did. I smelled delicious cookies baking. It was like all of those things that make you feel good, comfortable, safe, those types of feelings, which is what you would want to have in a healing environment. But the energy that you do have and that you command when we're in session was very palpable. And I recall at one point, I thought you were touching either my feet, but you were at my head or the other way around. And I felt good. As soon as you told me that after the reconnection, that I would have the ability not only to be healed, but to be healing on the earth, on the land, with animals, that did something, not just on a cellular, physical level, but emotionally and mentally. That was very powerful, the way that you said that, because it wasn't just, I'm doing something to you and you're done. It was, you are now this walking
You're
ability.
healing the planet. Yeah, you're connected to the grid and you're bringing energy, light, and information onto the planet to help heal the planet.
The term is empowering. It's an empowering way to let someone continue that process and to continue to pay it forward.
Beautiful.
I'm wondering if you think those lives were real. Do you think you really lived those lives? Do you think they were archetypes that you just needed to
Mhm.
see because you are on such a very pertinent mission?
That's a great question. They feel like memories.
So,
You know,
therefore, you're remembering something. Yes.
that's what I feel like. Even in the YouTube regression that I did and other meditations that I've
Mhm.
had, things have come through. They feel like memories which distinguishes it from something else. I don't know. But that's just what it feels like. And whether or not it certainly could be a vision that was placed in my consciousness to help me learn. But would I know the difference? I don't know. I don't know that I'd know the difference, but it feels like a memory. It more than a dream. I was guided to describe what it was like as if it were in a dream. It felt less like a dream and more like a
A
memory.
memory.
Yeah, because I remember it, whereas with a dream, it fades so quickly.
It does. Details get sketchy, and often you can hold on to a main feeling or idea, but those other things that you were describing now wouldn't be so readily available.
Yeah.
I have been impressed since the first time I talked to you, but were you impressed with how pointed and clear and enlightened your higher self was?
You question yourself as you're sitting there. So I was kind of struggling a little bit during that conversation with, am I just making this up? And you do have to surrender a bit
Yeah.
as you're doing it and just allow. But listening back to it, I'm like, that was not me. When you listen back, you get that other perspective. Because there were some long pauses where I was waiting for stuff to come through because she was asking questions and I didn't do an initial yes. So I could see like where my ego was trying to pop through. Oh, she wants an answer. Let me give her an answer. I think that's probably what most people in hypnosis struggle with is this like wanting to please the hypnotherapist too. But really, it's just surrendering to that process and allowing the higher self. Not all of it made perfect sense. How I was describing things were just like, she knows this. She knows this. She knows she can raise the vibration just by grabbing it from above and lifting it from above. And what I realize now is what I was saying that I could use my awareness as opposed to using my higher self as opposed to my 3D human to raise the vibration just by connecting with the higher self and just through awareness is how I raise the vibration. So even just listening to it now, before this interview, I got more insights from it than I had then.
Other
I
people say
understand more
that.
now than I did back in 2021. Oh, that's what I was trying to say to myself. So I didn't understand everything that I was
Oh,
saying.
and we couldn't, right? If we're constantly evolving, our consciousness
Yes,
is constantly evolving. But I think that's neat because the guidance you were giving yourself is timeless.
timeless.
I think that's amazing. Outside of time and space, like you were saying about
Mhm.
the regression that you observed was outside of time, space, and really location that we're familiar with.
Yes.
Is that what you meant by you could do it the hard way as far as you felt resistance, as far as lifting vibration? Like you were trying to make it happen from a 3D perspective as opposed to just allowing?
So the harder path is through all of these life lessons that we're faced with and heavy, like negative emotion.
Yeah.
Whereas I could also choose to do lighter experiences and have make choices in my life that allowed me to have fun and be lighter and also raise the vibration that way. And that's okay too. So both serve the purpose, but I found that I'm doing a mix of both. Yeah.
There is a tendency in the spiritual community to be so serious a lot of times because the topic requires esoteric thinking, which can be deep thinking. And we don't often have a lot of fun, but it doesn't have to be this heavy healing or this heavy approach 24/7. Conversations
Yeah.
with God was not started out a little heavy, but
Right,
at
yeah.
the end of the day, I laughed throughout that entire book. I
Yes, yes.
loved his impressions.
Yes. So, having fun is so important. So that was another thing that came out of that, that it's okay to do things that bring my heart joy and be with people that bring my heart
Bring you up.
joy, even if they're not like maybe the best people for me. But if that is the energy that we're creating in that moment, then that's okay. And it's okay to watch a show. It's okay to do things that are fun and that lighten the energy too.
I love that. Here, here. No, really, because sometimes I think, should I be wasting my time on this drivel? And if it brings joy at that moment, is it drivel? If it's not hurting anyone.
Yeah. We're here to have a human experience for sure.
Exactly. And I'm getting really good at it. And it's bringing me down sometimes, Jen, which is why I
I
saw
hear
it
you.
too.
We're all going through that though. No one is immune to that. No one.
No one.
Definitely not me. I find that the clients that are drawn to me have gone through similar experiences, are going through similar experiences that I've gone through. And I'm here to also help share some of that wisdom and guidance to help them to their next step. Not everyone, but a lot of them.
No, for sure. You and I had talked just very little bits around our life experiences. And at times, you have to save yourself and say, this other person's journey, I need to watch with love from over here, because this bringing everybody down isn't doing anyone any good.
Yeah. Yep.
So you're allowing that release from a situation that doesn't serve you absolutely resonates with me, and the tough decisions that we make while we're staying with it for a whole lot of different reasons. And then when we finally say enough's enough, we have to.
Yeah. Yeah. This year for me has been all about boundaries and removing people from my life that are lower vibrational. And I've been really pushed to do that and to really align this year more than any year. I feel like that's the energy on the planet right now, supporting people and doing that.
I agree with you 100%. Um, why should people pursue past life regressions? You said that you had been reading Dolores Cannon, and that's kind
Mhm.
of how you prepared. You read some Brian Weiss and some other types of literature. Did that convince you, or do you think that's enough to convince someone to pursue a past life regression just to find
Mhm.
things out about themselves? Or
Mhm.
what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that definitely sparked my curiosity. I definitely think that anyone who is interested in this topic would benefit from reading those books. They're fascinating. But if you're skeptical too, I wanted to connect with who I truly am. Really, I wanted to learn about me. So that was my motivation, was to see, oh, what adventures have I been on? What information do I have to share with myself about my life? And what could help propel me forward? I'm always for accelerating evolution. I've just been on this path. I want to get where I need to go. What I've learned is that healing never ends, and you can't say you're ascended completely. We have ascended masters who were enlightened, but I don't feel like I'm going to reach that this lifetime, you know? So, as much as I can reach in this lifetime, I'm all for. But I was curious, and curiosity is what led me to this, and it did not disappoint. You have to just be open-minded and not get caught up in the monkey mind of what if this isn't real? What if I don't see anything? Because initially there's that pang of fear. What if I don't see anything? And you just have to let that go and just surrender and just relax into it and just wait because the vision will come to you, and just start describing anything, whether it's dark or light or whatever you're seeing. However dumb it sounds, just start describing it. And then it gets easier and easier to go into that state also. I was told by someone, another healer that I've worked with that does meditation, she said that I should never go under by myself because I go under so far that I might not come out. So,
You
Never
have to
gonna
make a
regret
deal
it.
with your higher self before
Right,
you do it.
right,
If I'm under for more than an hour and a half, come get me.
yeah, right, yeah. But I usually put a timer on when I do any type of meditation. But yeah, I would say curiosity is so empowering and it's so enlightening in and of itself. Just be curious. It's an amazing experience. It was life-changing for me and one of the most powerful healing experiences in my life. I've had the personal reconnection myself. I actually was reconnected, yeah, probably about 6 months before this experience, and I'm sure it led me to the
Oh,
QHHT. And I've actually thought about becoming a practitioner. It's a lot of training, so that's what's held me back, but it's not off the table for sure.
you'd be excellent. You have the ability to, especially having had the experience, you will have the ability to help quell people's fears
Mhm.
about losing control. But then the second thing is, am I making this up? Trust me. Just trust yourself, right?
Yeah,
I really appreciate you and appreciate your taking this time to share your experiences with us and just to share your energy with everyone listening.
So
you're
much.
welcome.
This concludes this episode of Past Lives Cafe podcast with Jennifer Boulanger. If you would like to contact Jennifer, this information will be in the show notes. If you or someone you know would like to discuss a past life experience on this podcast, please reach out to me at keone@quantumjourneygo.com. The enchantment continues on the Mystical Mermaid Lounge podcast that I co-host with Chloe Brown, a welcome space where we nourish the souls of all spiritual seekers. And remember, while we can't relive the past, together we can heal it. Thank you so much for listening. If you are interested in my services, visit me at www.quantumjourneygo.com or drop me a note at pastlivescafe.buzzsprout.com. Stay well and be present.